great hall of Valdos had never known silence like this. Serafina stood in the center of carnage, white hair matted with blood that wasn't all hers, violet eyes blazing with power that made the very air shimmer. Her wedding gown, the second wedding gown she'd worn in 3 months, hung in tatters, revealing armor beneath. Silver flames danced along the longsword in her right hand, casting shadows that writhed like living things across walls scarred by battle. 3 thrones loomed behind her, carved from white stone veined with something that glowed faintly blue in the darkness. Empty now, waiting. 3 kings knelt at her feet. King Thaddeus Frostborn knelt to her left, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, pale hair dark with sweat and gore. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Those gray eyes that had been empty as winter sky for 30 years now burned. Fear, joy, love, desperation. Every emotion the curse had stolen flooding back in a torrent that made his hands shake. The frost that had been killing him was gone, melted away as if it had never existed. Prince Lysander knelt beside his twin, one hand pressed against a wound in his side that bled between his fingers. His face was a mirror of his brother's, same sharp features, same pale hair, same newly awakened eyes full of feelings he had no practice controlling. He was crying. Actually crying, tears cutting clean tracks through the blood on his face. King Brennick Ironscars knelt on her right, the warrior king whose body was a map of every battle he'd survived. His massive broadsword lay at his feet, surrendered. Not in defeat, but in respect. His dark eyes held something like awe. And in the center, chained with silver shackles that burned, wherever they touched skin, knelt King Aurelian Goldheart. The Golden King wasn't so golden anymore. His perfect face was bruised purple and black. His amber eyes, usually so calculating, now showed only rage and something close to fear. The silver chains forced him to his knees, but pride kept his spine straight. Choose. His voice was hoarse, damaged. Execute me or forgive me. But you cannot have both, little wolf. The hall held its breath. Every guard who'd survived the siege, every courtier who'd witnessed the final confrontation, every wolf who'd fought when Aurelian's forces breached the eastern wall, they all waited for judgment. Serafina looked down at the man who'd caused such devastation, who'd allied with her stepmother, who'd betrayed every law of hospitality to take what he wanted, who'd nearly destroyed 3 kingdoms for the sake of possessing one woman's power. The Luna fire in her blade pulsed, responding to her anger. It would be so easy. One thrust, end him, prevent him from ever threatening anyone again. But she looked past him to Thaddeus, to the man who'd offered her brutal honesty when everyone else dealt in pretty lies, who'd risked his own life, who'd been actively dying from a 12-generation curse rather than use her as a weapon, who'd learned to feel, to love, to be fully alive, all because she'd refused to let him die empty. I already chose, Serafina said quietly, and her voice carried through the silent hall like a bell. The night I walked away from Kelmont. Thaddeus's eyes closed briefly. Relief washed over his features, still so new to showing emotion that every feeling was written large and unmistakable. But that choice, Serafina continued, lowering the burning blade until its point rested against stone, nearly destroyed us all. The silver fire flickered, then died. The sword went dark. To understand why 3 kings kneel before a woman who was thrown away as worthless, she said, you need to know where this began. Not here, not tonight, but 3 months ago in a different hall at a different ceremony. She looked at the assembled crowd, nobles and servants, warriors and healers, all exhausted from battle but hungry for the story. The night I learned, Serafina said softly, that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest transformations. The moonlight streaming through shattered windows seemed to brighten. The torches flared, and the world shifted backward through memory, through time, to the moment everything changed. 3 months earlier, the great hall of Kelmont Castle dripped with white roses. They filled every alcove, spilled from every ledge, their cloying perfume so thick Serafina could taste it. Moonflowers, delicate silver blooms that only opened under the full moon, had been woven into garlands draped across vaulted ceilings. Someone had spent a fortune on this ceremony. For nothing, as it turned out. Serafina stood at the altar in white silk that had taken 3 months to complete. Her hair, white as the roses, white as the moonflowers, white as fresh snow, had been braided with silver thread and tiny crystals that caught the light. No veil. Omega brides didn't cover their faces. The whole point was for the pack to witness the claiming, to see the mark, to validate the bond. Her hands wanted to shake. She locked them still. Around her, Kelmont's pack filled the hall in ordered ranks. Hundreds of wolves in their finest, arranged by hierarchy. Alphas at the front in leather and silk. Betas behind them in good wool. Omegas in the back, watching with the hunger of those who dreamed of standing where she stood. They had no idea how lucky they were not to be her. At the front in seats of honor sat Lady Morgana Ashwood, the woman who'd raised Seraphina, but had never been her mother in any way that mattered, and beside her Lady Isolde, Morgana's true daughter, Seraphina's half-sister, though they shared nothing but a father who'd died too soon to protect either of them. Where Seraphina was pale as moonlight, Isolde glowed golden. Honey hair, warm brown eyes, skin that tanned like wheat in summer. She was beautiful in the way that made people comfortable, safe, normal. Everything Seraphina wasn't. Morgana watched with a face arranged into maternal pride, but Seraphina had lived under that woman's roof for 23 years. She knew the calculation behind every smile, the coldness beneath every gesture of affection. Father Aldrich Ancient, dignified as Beowulf, too old to threaten anyone, stood between Seraphina and the doors. His ceremonial robes were deep blue embroidered with silver moons. His voice, trained by decades of ritual, carried easily. "We gather under the full moon to witness sacred union. Lord Gareth Blackstone, heir to Kelmont, and Lady Seraphina, Moonwhite, daughter of the late Lord Kelmont. Daughter, not legitimate heir, not honored bloodline, just daughter. Her father had died when she was 5. Raiders from the Western Territories, they said, though Seraphina sometimes wondered. Morgana had certainly benefited from his death, consolidated power. Controlled his wealth, raised his daughters as she saw fit. One daughter she'd groomed for greatness. The other she'd kept carefully small. But Seraphina had one thing Isolde didn't. One thing that should have been her salvation. She had Gareth. They'd bonded at 13 during the spring festival. Their wolves had recognized each other with the certainty that supposedly came from the moon goddess herself. The bond had formed fragile but real, connecting them in ways that went deeper than words. For 10 years, Seraphina had endured Morgana's coldness, Isolde's subtle cruelties, the pack's whispers about her strange appearance. She'd endured because she had Gareth. Because one day she'd be his mate, his equal, protected by his status and his bond. She'd been such a fool. The great doors opened. Gareth entered to a rustling of fabric as the pack turned to watch. He was handsome in the way powerful alphas often were: tall, broad-shouldered, strong-featured, dark hair pulled back from a face that spoke of good breeding and better bloodlines. Black leather trimmed with silver, House Blackstone's colors. A ceremonial sword at his hip. He walked down the aisle with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. But his scent was wrong. Every wolf had a unique scent signature. Gareth's had always been cedarwood and reigned familiar and comforting as home. But tonight it carried an edge of something bitter, something sharp, fear. Seraphina's heart began to race. She searched his face as he approached, looking for explanation. Was he ill-injured? What could make him afraid at his own mating ceremony? Gareth reached the altar and stopped. 3 feet away. Too far. He should have closed the distance taken. Her hand smiled at her. That was tradition. Father Aldrich cleared his throat gently. Lord Gareth, if you would. I need to say something first. The hall went silent. You didn't interrupt ceremonies, didn't disrupt sacred rituals. Seraphina felt ice begin forming in her stomach, crystallizing around her heart. Gareth, her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. What's wrong? He didn't look at her, stared at some point over her left shoulder, jaw, tight hands clenched. I have been bonded to Seraphina Moonwhite since we were children, he said, voice carrying through the hall. For 10 years, I believed this bond was the goddess's will. I believed we were fated mates. Past tense. Believed. Were. No, please, no. But I have come to understand, Gareth continued, strength building in his voice like he was drawing courage from the watching crowd, that wolves can be wrong, that bonds can be false, that the goddess sometimes tests us with obstacles we must overcome to find our true path. The white roses suddenly smelled rotten. The candlelight was too bright, too hot. Every eye in the hall fixed on Seraphina, watching her humiliation unfold in real time like entertainment. Gareth, she managed, please, don't do this. He finally looked at her, and she saw nothing. No love, no regret, no affection, only relief, like a prisoner seeing the door to his cell swing open. I, Lord Gareth Blackstone, heir to Kelmont, he said with formal precision, do hereby reject you, Seraphina Moonwhite, heir as my mate. The bond between them screamed. That fragile thread that had connected them for 10 years began to unravel. It felt like someone had reached into her chest and started tearing out her ribs one by one. Seraphina heard herself make a sound not quite human, more animal than she'd ever managed when trying to shift. You are cursed, Gareth said, and now his voice was cruel, cutting, like he wanted to make sure she bled. Your white hair, your violet eyes, They're marks of something unnatural, something wrong. You cannot shift properly. You cannot even feel your wolf the way normal omegas do. You are defective. The bond snapped completely. Serafina's knees gave out. She went down hard, catching herself on hands that suddenly couldn't support her weight. Blood filled her mouth where she'd bitten through her tongue. Tears she'd fought to contain spilled hot down her cheeks. The pain was indescribable. Like every nerve in her body was on fire and freezing simultaneously. Like her soul was being ripped in half. The whispers started immediately rustling through the crowd like wind through dead leaves. Always knew something was wrong with her. Poor Lord Gareth bonded to that thing for 10 years. The white hair is a curse mark. Can't even shift. What kind of wolf can't shift? Defective bloodline. Through the agony, through the tears, Serafina heard Gareth speak again. I have found my true mate, he announced. The woman the goddess intended for me all along. The world tilted sideways. Lady Isolde Ashwood, will you accept my claim? Isolde, her sister, her golden, perfect, normal sister who'd always looked at Gareth with slightly too much warmth, who'd always found reasons to visit when he came calling, who'd been Morgana's favorite, groomed for exactly this kind of moment. Serafina forced her head up through the pain, forced herself to look. Isolde stood from her seat beside Morgana. She wore white, not as elaborate as Serafina's gown, but white nonetheless, as if she'd known, as if she'd prepared for this exact scenario. I accept, Isolde said, voice trembling with perfect false modesty. If it is the goddess's will. The goddess, as if the goddess had anything to do with this calculated betrayal. Gareth crossed to Isolde in 3 long strides. He cupped her face with tenderness he'd never shown Serafina, and he kissed her. The crowd erupted shocked whispers that quickly shifted to approval. Of course, Isolde was everything Serafina wasn't. Normal, beautiful in conventional ways. Strong wolf, good bloodline, Morgana's precious daughter. Serafina was still on her hands and knees, blood dripping from her mouth onto white silk. Every breath hurt. The broken bond was a gaping wound, bleeding damage only she could feel. Get up. The thought came from somewhere deep inside. Somewhere that had survived Morgana's cruelty. The pack's whispers, 10 years of being less than Isolde in every way. Get up. Don't let them see you broken. She locked her arms, straightened her legs, forced herself to stand even though the world spun and her chest felt caved in. Gareth pulled back from kissing Isolde. He turned to Father Aldrich, who looked thoroughly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Continue the ceremony, Gareth commanded, with my true mate. Gareth, Serafina's voice came out hoarse, damaged. She tasted blood and tried again. We were bonded for 10 years. You can't just... I can, he said coldly. I have. The bond was a mistake. You are a mistake. Something crystallized inside her chest, something hard and bright and furious. She straightened her spine, wiped blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. Her white hair had come loose from its braids, falling wild around her face, but she was past caring what they thought. Then I am free of you, she said clearly. Her voice didn't shake. Free of your weakness, free of your cowardice, free of a man who breaks sacred bonds because he's too spineless to honor them. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. You didn't speak to alphas like that, especially not broken, rejected omegas with blood on their faces. Gareth's face flushed dark red. His hand went to the sword at his hip. You dare! The doors of the great hall exploded, not opened, not swung wide, exploded inward with a concussion that shook the floor. The heavy oak doors, each 12 feet tall, bound with iron strong enough to withstand a battering ram, blew off their hinges. They crashed to the stone floor with a sound like thunder. Splinters rained across the hall. The crowd screamed and scattered. Through the smoke and dust, 4 figures entered on horseback. The temperature plummeted. Serafina's breath misted in front of her face despite the summer heat. Frost began creeping across the floor in delicate, impossible patterns, spreading from the hooves of the first 2 horses. Power flooded the space. Not ordinary alpha dominance, but something vast and ancient and terrible. It pressed against Serafina's skin like a physical weight, making her bones ache. Around her, wolves dropped to their knees, not choosing to submit but unable to resist. Even Gareth fell to one knee, hand still on his sword but head bowed. Only Serafina remained standing. Not because she was strong enough to resist that crushing power, but because her legs had locked. Shock, terror, and something else. Recognition. The 4 riders advanced at a walk, horse's hooves, striking stone with sharp, deliberate sounds. Each impact echoed through the silent hall. The first 2 were identical twins. They wore armor of white steel chased with silver, no helmets. Pale blonde hair fell to their shoulders, nearly as white as Seraphina's own. Their faces could have been carved from ice, all sharp angles and cold perfection. Gray eyes like winter storms, empty of any emotion. Behind them rode Gold Incarnate. His armor was gilded, ornate, probably worth more than Kelmont's entire treasury. Hair like spun metal catching the light. A face so beautiful it was almost painful. Perfect features. Golden skin eyes like amber honey. He smiled, and it was a predator's smile. The fourth was different. Massive scarred his armor, black steel marked with dents and scratches from actual combat. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face that had seen too many battles. He didn't smile. Just watched everything with sharp attention. The twins stopped their horses 15 feet from where Seraphina stood. This close, the cold radiating from them made her shiver despite the summer night. One dismounted with fluid grace. His boots touched stone, and frost spread from the contact in a perfect circle. We heard, he said, voice like wind across a frozen lake, that there was a mating ceremony tonight. The other twin dismounted beside his brother. We came for the woman with Luna blood. Luna blood. The whispers exploded. Heads turned towards Seraphina. She felt the weight of every eye, but she couldn't look away from the two men in front of her. Something about them called to her in ways she didn't understand. Who are you? Gareth demanded from his knees, trying for authority and failing. How dare you interrupt sacred? The Golden Rider laughed, warm, charming, completely at odds with the danger in his eyes. How dare we? He dismounted with theatrical flourish. My dear boy, we are kings. We dare whatever we wish. He walked forward, each step measured and graceful. When he smiled at Seraphina, she felt the urge to run. King Aurelian Goldheart of Salanthus. He introduced himself with an elegant bow. And you must be the infamous Seraphina Moonwhite, even lovelier than reported. The fourth rider dismounted, movements heavier but no less controlled. He didn't approach, simply stood beside his horse, arms crossed. King Brennick Iron Scars of Catherine, he said, voice rough as gravel. My seers said there was a white-haired Omega in Kelmont who would stand in silver fire and break chains that have bound kings for 12 generations. His eyes fixed on Seraphina. I had to see for myself. The first twin stepped forward. Frost followed his footsteps like a loyal hound. I am King Thaddeus Frostborn of Valdos, he said. His voice was completely flat, emotionless. And this is my brother, Prince Lysander. The second twin inclined his head fractionally. 4 rulers, 3 kingdoms, all here for her. Seraphina's mind couldn't process it. This had to be shock from the broken bond, fever dream from trauma. Kings didn't travel weeks across hostile territories for worthless broken Omegas. There must be a mistake, Morgana said, rising from her seat. Her voice was controlled, but Seraphina heard the tremor. Fear. Seraphina is nobody. Cursed bloodline, weak wolf. Surely you've come for... We came for her, Thaddeus interrupted. His voice never rose, but it silenced Morgana instantly. The woman with Luna bloodline. The last living descendant of the first Luna. The one whose power has been suppressed since childhood. Every head turned to stare at Seraphina again. Luna bloodline, suppressed power. What did that mean? I don't understand, she whispered. You will, Lysander said quietly. His voice was slightly warmer than his brother's. But first business. Gareth found courage or stupidity. He rose to his feet, hand still on sword. Lady Seraphina was bonded to me, he said. By rights she... You rejected her. Brennick's voice was iron. We heard you. Every person in this hall heard you. You called her cursed, called her defective, chose another woman at the altar. He walked forward slowly, deliberately. Gareth's bravado crumbled. He was a powerful alpha by Kelmont standards. But Brennick was a king, a warrior who'd conquered territories through personal combat. The difference was a candle compared to a bonfire. You had your chance, Brennick continued, stopping inches from Gareth. You threw it away, like a fool discarding gold because he can't recognize its value. He turned his back on Gareth, ultimate insult, and looked at Seraphina. My seers don't lie, he said. They saw you in silver fire. They saw chains breaking. They saw the future, and you were at its center. Whatever these people told you about yourself, it was lies. Aurelian circled Seraphina like a predator assessing prey. His smile remained charming on the surface. Salanthus is the wealthiest kingdom in all territories, he said smoothly. Gold, silks, jewels, anything you desire. Imagine returning here in a year, draped in cloth of gold, wearing a crown. Imagine your sister's face. His smile sharpened. Wouldn't that be satisfying? It would be. Seraphina couldn't deny the dark appeal, but something in his smile made her uneasy. Too practiced, too perfect. Thaddeus approached. He moved differently than the others, no swagger, no performance. Just quiet purpose. Frost followed him across the floor. He stopped an arm's length away. Gray eyes studied her face with intensity that should have felt invasive but didn't, like he was memorizing her. "I offer you a contract," he said flatly. "Not fairy tales, not romance. A political arrangement." Of all possible things, she hadn't expected that. "You will be Queen of Valdos in name," Thaddeus continued, voice neutral. "You will have power, protection, autonomy. In return, when appropriate, you will provide heirs. That is all." "That is all," Aurelian laughed. "Brother, your courtship needs work." Thaddeus ignored him. His eyes never left Seraphina's face. "I will not love you," he said. "I am incapable of it. My bloodline is cursed 12 generations. We cannot feel. No emotion, no connection, no warmth. I will never lie about what I am. Never pretend to be more." The brutal honesty stole her breath. "If you come with me," Thaddeus said quietly, "you will have a husband who expects nothing from your heart, demands nothing of your emotions. You will be free." Free. The word echoed through her shattered soul. Gareth had demanded everything: devotion, submission, unwavering faith, and thrown it all away for something shinier. These kings offered power, wealth, revenge. But Thaddeus offered truth. "Why, Seraphina asked hoarsely. "Why would any of you want a broken Omega, her own mate rejected?" "You're not broken," Brennick said firmly. "You're hidden. Your bloodline is rarest in existence." Aurelian added, voice hungry. "Luna bloodline supposedly died out 2 centuries ago. But it didn't. It was suppressed, hidden, and now it surfaces in you." "I don't have power," Seraphina protested. "I can barely shift. I'm—" "Suppressants," Thaddeus interrupted. His emotionless voice made the word hit harder. "Someone has fed you suppressants since childhood, binding your wolf-caging abilities. The question is who and why." Every eye turned to Morgana. Her stepmother's face paled, but she lifted her chin defiant. "This is ridiculous," Morgana said coldly. "Seraphina is my late husband's byblow. Nothing more. If she had special bloodline, I would have—" "You would have what?" Lysander asked, voice quiet but cutting. "Nurtured it, encouraged it, or suppressed it so your daughter could shine brighter." Morgana's lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing. The truth hung unspoken but obvious. 23 years of being told she was worthless. 23 years of being less than Isolde. 23 years of believing she was cursed, defective, wrong. What if it had all been lies? What if she'd been powerful all along? "I choose," Seraphina heard herself say. 4 kings went still. She looked at Aurelian with his golden promises, tempting but hollow. She looked at Brennick with his respect and visions, intriguing but uncertain. She looked at Thaddeus with his brutal honesty. "I choose King Thaddeus of Valdos," she said clearly. The hall erupted in gasps. Aurelian's perfect smile vanished. His amber eyes went cold. "Son, you're making a mistake," he said softly. "Dangerously." "Perhaps," Seraphina replied, "but it's my mistake. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing for myself." Brennick nodded slowly. "Wise choice. Thaddeus is many things, but he's honorable. He'll keep his word." Thaddeus's expression didn't change. He simply extended his hand. "Then we leave," he said. "Tonight, there's nothing for you here." He was right. Her father was dead. Morgana had never been a real mother. Gareth had rejected her publicly. Isolde had betrayed her. The pack had watched her humiliation like entertainment. There was nothing in Kelmont but pain. Seraphina took a step toward Thaddeus, then another. Her legs were unsteady, but she forced them to move. "Seraphina, wait!" Morgana's voice rang out. Seraphina stopped but didn't turn. "You don't know what you're doing," Morgana said, genuine fear bleeding through. "You don't know what he is, what his bloodline carries. The curse is mine to bear," Thaddeus said coldly. "Not yours. You have no claim on her." She's nothing to you," Lysander interrupted. "You proved that tonight. You sat there and watched her be rejected, humiliated, destroyed, and did nothing. No mother would do that." Morgana's face twisted with rage and desperation. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Seraphina. "When you're freezing in his bed wishing for warmth he can never give. You'll regret it." Seraphina finally turned to look at her stepmother. "I regret nothing," she said quietly, "except believing I deserved how you treated me." She placed her hand in Thaddeus's. His skin was ice cold, shockingly cold, like touching snow barehanded, but his grip was steady. "We leave immediately," he said to his brother. Lysander nodded. Horses are ready. Seraphina walked out of Kelmont's great hall without looking back. Behind her, she heard Gareth protest. Morgana shriek, the crowd murmur in confusion. She didn't care. The Cold King led her into the night, and with every step away from that place, the broken bond hurt a little less. She had been rejected. She had been called cursed. She had been thrown away like garbage. But 3 kings had traveled weeks across hostile territories to claim her, to fight for her, to recognize something her own people had tried to destroy. Whatever happened next, whatever this Luna bloodline meant, whatever curse lived in Thaddeus's blood, it had to be better than what she'd left behind. The moon hung full and bright as they mounted horses and rode into darkness. Seraphina didn't know it yet, but that night, the worst night of her life, was also the beginning of everything. The journey to Valdos took 7 days that blurred together like a fever dream. They rode hard, stopping only when the horses needed rest. Seraphina sat in front of Thaddeus on his massive black destrier, wrapped in furs that didn't quite keep out the cold radiating from his body. The ruined wedding gown beneath them was a constant reminder of everything she'd left behind. Behind them, Kelmont disappeared into memory. Ahead, somewhere in the frozen north, lay Valdos. Thaddeus spoke perhaps 20 words total in those first 3 days. His arms created a cage around her to hold the reins protective and distant simultaneously. She could feel his chest against her back with every breath he took. Slow, measured, perfectly controlled. Nothing about him seemed spontaneous. Every movement was calculated, efficient, emotionless. Lysander rode on their right flank, identical to his brother in appearance, but somehow different in presence. Slightly warmer, though that wasn't saying much. The Valdos guards surrounded them in formation, a dozen warriors in white steel faces hidden by helmets. Aurelian and Brennick had departed separately. Aurelian with a final warning that felt like threat. "This isn't over, little wolf. Remember that." Brennick with respectful words, "You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone convince otherwise." On the 3rd night, they camped in a forest where temperature dropped so sharply Seraphina's tears froze on her cheeks. The guards built a large fire, but it barely helped. The cold here felt ancient, embedded in the ground itself. A woman approached Captain Astrid, one of the senior guards. She had kind eyes and a weathered face. "Your Majesty," she said, offering a bedroll, "I've prepared space by the fire. There's food if you're hungry." Your Majesty. The title still felt surreal. "Thank you," Seraphina managed. She ate without tasting, sat by the fire without feeling warm. The broken bond still ached like a phantom limb. Astrid settled nearby, keeping watch. After a long silence, she spoke quietly. "The severed bond will heal. It takes time, but it heals." "How do you know?" "I was rejected 20 years ago. My fated mate decided he wanted someone with stronger bloodlines." Astrid poked the fire, sending sparks spiraling. "I survived, found my way to Valdos, built a life that didn't revolve around someone who couldn't see my worth." "How long did it take to stop hurting? Months for the physical pain? Years for the emotional damage?" Astrid looked at her directly. "But you will survive. You're stronger than you think." That phrase again, 3rd person to say it. Seraphina wanted to believe, but all she felt was hollow and broken and afraid. Later, as she lay staring at stars through pine branches, Thaddeus appeared out of darkness like a ghost. He wore only a thin black shirt despite the cold. "May I sit?" First words he'd spoken directly to her since Kelmont. "It's your camp," Seraphina said. "You're my queen, that gives you authority." Thaddeus settled onto a log across the fire. "Even over me in certain matters. I don't feel like a queen. Few rulers feel adequate to their titles initially. It's something you grow into." Seraphina studied his face. Striking in cold perfection, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, features carved from marble. But there was something profoundly unsettling about the complete absence of expression. "Can I ask about your curse?" "You may ask anything." "You said you can't feel. What does that mean exactly?" Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment. Fire crackled between them. "I feel nothing," he said finally, matter of fact. "No joy, no sorrow, no anger or fear or love. No physical sensations, not pain, not pleasure, not this cold making you shiver. I exist, but I don't experience existence." The casual horror made her chest tighten. "Since birth?" "Yes, as was Lysander, as was our father before us, going back 12 generations." "What caused it?" Thaddeus gazed into flames. "My ancestor King Vareth Frostborn watched his father destroyed by a woman who betrayed him. She used their mate bond to manipulate him, weaken him until he was nothing but a puppet. When his father died, broken, humiliated, powerless, Vareth vowed no Frostborn would ever be so vulnerable again. So he cursed himself. He made a bargain with a witch named Selvath, powerful dark practitioner. He asked her to remove his capacity for emotion, make him immune to weaknesses that destroyed his father. She agreed, but there was a price. Always. Thaddeus shifted slightly. Selvath was in love with Vareth, had been for years. He rejected her, told her he could never love, needed to be free of such weakness. So when she cast the spell, she made it hereditary. Every son born to Frostborn line carries the same curse. That's monstrous. That's what happens when love becomes obsession. He paused. But she added one more clause Vareth didn't anticipate. If any Frostborn king ever somehow broke through the emotional barrier, if we ever felt love, truly felt it, the curse would complete itself. Our hearts would freeze solid. We'd die within days. Wood in the fire popped loudly. So the curse protects you from feeling, Seraphina said slowly, but if you do feel it kills you. Correct. That's why you offered a contract. You're not capable of romance. I'm not capable of any emotion. Romance requires feelings I don't have. But I recognize logic, strategy, mutual benefit. Political marriage serves Valdos's interests. You need protection from those who suppressed you. I need heirs. The arrangement is practical. Practical marriage is business transaction. But wasn't that better than Gareth 10 years believing they were fated, thinking the bond meant something, and he discarded it all when convenient? At least Thaddeus was honest. Why did you come for me if you don't feel anything? Why travel to Kelmont? My advisors have networks. 3 months ago, one reported unusual magical signatures in Kelmont, the kind associated with Luna bloodline. Thaddeus steepled his fingers. Luna-blooded wolves haven't existed for 2 centuries. If the bloodline resurfaced, political implications were significant. Political implications. You can forge and sever mate bonds. In wolf society, where bonds determine alliances, where rejection starts wars, where fated mates hold sacred status, someone who can create or destroy those bonds has immense power. Ice formed in her stomach. You want to use me as a weapon? No. Something flickered across his face. Not quite emotion, but something. I want to ensure no one else uses you as weapon. Aurelian understood your value the moment he heard. Why do you think he was at Kelmont? He wants to control you. Use your power to manipulate alliances across all kingdoms. And you don't. I want you safe, because you deserve safety. And I want heirs carrying your bloodline, because strong magic serves Valdos. But I will never force you to use power. That choice will always be yours. She wanted to believe him, but she trusted before. I don't even know how to use this power. I can barely shift. My wolf is weak, distant. Because someone suppressed it. Thaddeus leaned forward. Your stepmother, most likely. Question is how she knew what you were and why she hid it. Morgana's face flashed through Seraphina's mind. The coldness. The way she'd reacted when kings mentioned Luna bloodline. The fear. She knew, Seraphina whispered. She's known all along. Or a resource she intended to sell when price was right. Aurelian didn't arrive at that ceremony by chance. Someone told him you'd be there. Someone who stood to profit. The betrayal cut deeper than the broken bond. Morgana had planned to sell her. Probably for years, just waiting for the right moment. Heat flared in Seraphina's chest, anger. Hot and bright. The fire in front of her suddenly surged, flames leaping twice their height. Thaddeus went very still. Guards jerked to attention, hands on weapons. Your Majesty, Astrid called. Are you all right? The flames settled back. Seraphina stared at the fire heart pounding. Did I do that? Yes. Thaddeus's voice was quiet but certain. Your power is waking. The further from Kelmont, from whoever suppressed you, the stronger it becomes. I don't know how to control it. You'll learn. He stood. For now, rest. We reach Valdos tomorrow evening. He walked into darkness, leaving Seraphina alone by fire that had responded to her emotion. She looked at her hands. They appeared normal, but something had moved through her. Real power. What else could she do? What other abilities waited to surface in what would happen when they fully awakened? The 7th day brought them deep into Valdos territory. The landscape had transformed into Wintertale. Snow covered everything in pristine white. Pine trees bent under ice. The sky was pale and clear cold, so intense that winds stung like knives. But it was beautiful. Hauntingly, impossibly beautiful. By mid-afternoon, they crested a ridge. Seraphina saw Valdos Castle for the first time. Her breath caught. It rose from frozen landscape like legend-made stone. White walls gleaming like pearl. Silver spires reaching toward sky. Massive fortifications that could withstand siege. It was enormous, ancient, impossibly beautiful. Home, Lysander said, riding beside them. First words he'd spoken to her directly. It's magnificent, Serafina breathed. It's cold. Everything in Valdos is cold. As they descended and approached, Serafina noticed people lining the road. Villagers stopped work to watch the procession. Whispers followed. Is that her, the new queen, so pale like frost herself? Maybe she'll break the curse. That last whisper made her heart skip. Break a curse that had existed 12 generations. She could barely control the power flickering inside her. Castle gates opened, massive iron-bound oak, groaning inward. They rode into a vast courtyard where more people waited. Guards in formation, servants in white and silver. And at the front, an elderly woman in deep blue robes, silver hair braided like a crown, lined face but sharp, knowing eyes. She radiated authority and something else. Power but different from alpha dominance. Older, stranger, magic. Thaddeus dismounted and lifted Serafina down. Her legs were unsteady after hours of riding, but she forced herself to stand straight. The elderly woman approached, studying Serafina with eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone. So, she said finally, voice surprisingly strong, you're the one who will either save us or destroy us. Elder Celestine, Thaddeus said, this is Lady Serafina Moonwhite, my wife, your queen. Wife. They hadn't completed any ceremony, but apparently in Valdos, a king's claim was enough. Lady Serafina, Celestine said, inclining her head slightly, I am High Priestess of Valdos, advisor to throne, keeper of histories, and someone who knows exactly what you are. I don't even know what I am, Serafina replied honestly. No, you wouldn't. They made sure of that. Celestine's eyes narrowed. But your ignorance won't protect you or them from what's coming. What's coming? Come, let's get you inside. We have much to discuss. These conversations aren't for courtyard ears. She turned and walked toward the castle entrance, clearly expecting to be followed. They entered Valdos Castle. The great hall was enormous, 3 times Kelmont's size. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Massive windows let in pale light reflecting off white stone. Tapestries hung between windows depicting frostborn history. Everything was beautiful and cold and empty of warmth. Celestine led them to a side chamber with a roaring fire that actually gave off heat. She gestured for Serafina to sit near flames. Leave us, Celestine said to guards. They bowed and withdrew. Even Thaddeus moved toward the door. Not you, Celestine said sharply. You need to hear this. Thaddeus closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed, face expressionless. Celestine settled into the chair across from Serafina with a slight groan. Do you know what a Luna is, child? The moon goddess, Serafina said uncertainly. Yes, but also once it was a title. First Luna was a woman who lived 3,000 years ago. First wolf blessed directly by moon goddess with power to create and sever mate bonds at will. Serafina's mouth went dry. Create bonds, that's possible. For those with Luna blood, yes. First Luna could forge connections between wolves with no natural bond. She could sever fated mates, strengthen weak bonds or weaken strong ones. In ancient wars, she was most valuable asset any kingdom had. With a touch, she could turn enemies into allies or destroy alliances that stood for generations. That's terrifying. Yes, Celestine agreed, which is why after First Luna died, powerful wolves hunted her descendants, killed most, enslaved others, used their blood to manipulate politics for centuries, until finally 200 years ago, the bloodline was believed extinct. But it wasn't. No, a few survived by hiding, by suppressing power so thoroughly even they forgot what they were. Celestine leaned forward. Your mother was one of them. Serafina's heart stopped. My mother, your real mother, not the woman who raised you. Celestine's voice softened. Her name was Alara Silvermoon. She was last known Luna-blooded wolf. She hid in Kelmont under false name pretending to be Common Omega. Your father, Lord Kelmont, fell in love with her, truly deeply. She bore him a daughter. You. The room spun. What happened to her? She died when you were young, officially illness, but I suspect Lady Morgana had other ideas. Celestine's expression hardened. Morgana was ambitious. She'd married Lord Kelmont for position, but he loved Alara, not her. When Alara died, Morgana claimed you as stepdaughter, raised you, and more importantly, suppressed your abilities. How potions most likely, mixed into food and drink from childhood. Designed to keep your wolf weak power dormant. She couldn't kill you too many questions. But she could cage you, make you believe you were worthless. All those years, all those times Morgana insisted Serafina drink her tonic. Special meals prepared just for her. herbs in her tea. It had all been poison. Not lethal, but poison nonetheless, designed to trap her in weakness. Why that? Because your power threatened her daughter's position, Celestine said bluntly. As long as you were defective, Isolde shone brighter, and Morgana likely planned to sell you eventually to highest bidder who understood your value. Aurelian. Among others, yes. Celestine glanced at Thaddeus. Your husband got to you first. Serafina looked at Thaddeus silent by the door. You knew all this, she said. Before Kelmont, you knew what I was. I knew you had Luna bloodline, Thaddeus replied. I didn't know your history details. But yes, I knew you were valuable. That's why I came. To use me, to protect you and ensure your power couldn't harm Valdos. His voice remained flat, but something flickered in his eyes. I never claimed nobility. I claimed honesty. Children, Celestine interrupted sharply, save marital disputes. We have a pressing problem. What problem? Celestine's expression became grave. Your power is waking. Every mile from Kelmont, every hour free from suppressants, your abilities have grown stronger. By now, probably close to full strength. Is that bad? It's dangerous because you have no training, no control. Luna power responds to emotion, and you've been through severe trauma. Rejection, humiliation, betrayal, all of that fuels your abilities. Serafina thought of fire surging when she felt angry. What happens if I can't control it? You could accidentally forge bonds with anyone near when emotions run high, or sever bonds that shouldn't be severed. Or worse, create a bond so strong it kills both parties. How would a bond kill someone? Celestine's eyes flicked to Thaddeus, then back. Child, what do you know about Frostborn curse him? That they can't feel emotion, and if they do, they die. Correct. Their hearts literally freeze solid. Curse punishes any Frostborn who experiences love. Celestine paused. Now what happens if Luna-blooded woman accidentally forges mate bond with Cursed King? Understanding crashed over Serafina. The bond would make him feel, she whispered. Yes. And feeling would trigger curse. Yes. So if I bonded with Thaddeus, he would die, Celestine said bluntly. Within days, heart would freeze. Nothing could stop it. Curse would complete itself. Serafina looked at Thaddeus in horror. You knew being near me could kill you, and you came anyway. Risk is manageable, Thaddeus said, maddeningly calm. As long as we don't complete claiming bite, as long as we maintain distance, as long as your emotions remain controlled. Controlled? My entire life just collapsed. You'll learn, Celestine said firmly. I'll teach you. Shielding, meditation, channeling power safely. But understand this is life or death. Not just for you, for everyone in this castle. If you lose control, if you accidentally bond with King or his brother, they die. And their deaths leave Valdos without leadership. Aurelian, or worse, moves in to claim throne. The weight crushed down on her shoulders. She wasn't just responsible for herself. She was responsible for an entire kingdom. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have choice, Celestine said, not unkindly. Power is already awake. Only question is whether you master it or it masters you. 3 days ago, she'd been preparing for a mating ceremony. Nobody, worthless, ordinary. Now she was a queen with power to forge and destroy bonds. A woman whose existence threatened the man who'd given her sanctuary. A weapon multiple kings wanted to control. I need to be alone. Celestine glanced at Thaddeus. He nodded. I'll have servants show you to chambers. Rest. We'll speak tomorrow. Serafina stood on the unsteady legs. She made it to the door before Thaddeus's voice stopped her. Serafina. She turned. You survived Kelmont. You survived rejection and betrayal and humiliation. You'll survive this too. It was the kindest thing anyone had said in days, even from a man who couldn't feel kindness at all. A servant led her through white stone corridors to a suite in the North Tower. Beautiful chambers decorated in white and silver and pale blue, and achingly impossibly cold. Serafina collapsed onto the massive bed, still wearing ruined gown and borrowed furs. She should change, should bathe, should do 1,000 things queens do. But all she could do was lie there and feel the weight of everything. Married to a man who couldn't love her. Power she couldn't control. A threat to everyone around her. Somewhere out there, Aurelian was planning. Morgana was plotting. And her entire past had been lies designed to keep her weak. Serafina curled into a ball and finally let herself cry. The tears froze on her cheeks. Even here in supposed safety, everything was cold. Outside her window, stars appeared. The full moon rose over mountains, silver and eternal. Watching, waiting, and deep inside Seraphina's chest where broken bond had left a wound, something new stirred. Not healing, not yet, but power, raw, untrained, dangerous. Growing stronger with every breath. 6 days passed in Valdo's castle like fever dreams wrapped in ice. Morning, Seraphina trained with Elder Celestine. The old woman taught her to sense the power coiled in her chest, lightning, in bare hands bright and fierce and barely contained. Your power responds to feeling, Celestine explained. Joy, sorrow, rage, fear all feed Luna abilities. You must learn to acknowledge emotion without letting it control you. Easier said than done. The broken bond still ached. Morgana's betrayal still burned. And beneath it all, constant awareness that one slip could kill Thaddeus or Lysander. Afternoons were court politics with Lady Helena, proper forms of address, noble house hierarchy, the delicate dance of diplomacy. You're the first queen Valdos has had in 50 years, Helena said briskly. The nobles will test you. Show strength without arrogance, intelligence without cunning. Walk the line carefully. Evenings were hardest. Thaddeus insisted they dine together for appearances. So every night, Seraphina sat at one end of a long table, Thaddeus at the other, eating in near silence while servants moved like ghosts between them. He was unfailingly polite, distantly courteous, completely, utterly emotionless. Sometimes she caught herself watching him, searching for cracks in that frozen facade. But there was nothing. He ate with mechanical precision, spoke only when necessary. His gray eyes never lingered. It shouldn't have hurt. He'd warned her. But part of her, the part still bleeding from Gareth's rejection, wondered if she was truly so unlovable that even magic couldn't make someone care. On the 7th morning, Thaddeus summoned her to his study. The wedding is tonight, he said without preamble. Seraphina blinked. What wedding? Ours, fuss. We claimed you in Kelmont but never completed formal ceremony. Valdos law requires proper wedding before court. Witnesses vows traditional elements. Oh, I didn't realize. I've delayed as long as politically feasible. Nobles are restless. They want confirmation the union is legitimate. He pulled a document from his desk. This is the contract I mentioned. Terms of our arrangement. Seraphina took the parchment with trembling fingers. The language was formal, legal, brutally clear. Lady Seraphina Moonwhite shall hold the title of Queen of Valdos with all attendant rights and privileges. She shall have autonomy over her person, her activities, and her associations. She shall not be compelled to use her abilities against her will. In exchange, she agrees to provide heirs to the Frostborn line when she deems appropriate and to represent Valdos in diplomatic functions as required. No claim of romantic affection is made by either party. This is a political alliance, nothing more. Everything he'd promised. Freedom, protection, honesty. And the loneliest document she'd ever read. If terms are acceptable, sign. If you wish to negotiate changes, tell me now. This was her life reduced to legal clauses. Marriage with no love, no warmth, no hope of connection. But what had love gotten her with Gareth Payne? Humiliation. Betrayal. At least this was honest. She signed her name. Seraphina Moonwhite. The ceremony begins at sunset. I've had wedding attire prepared. Servants will help you dress. Will it be large? The entire court will attend. Representatives from Catherine are here. Brennick arrived this morning. And Aurelian sent word yesterday that he intends to attend. Seraphina's blood ran cold. Aurelian is coming. Why would you allow that? I can't forbid a king without creating diplomatic incident. He requested permission formally before witnesses. To deny him suggests Valdos fears Solanthus. You think he's planning something. Aurelian always plans something. He doesn't accept rejection gracefully. Thaddeus moved to stand directly before her. But you'll be safe, I give you my word. Your word, from a man who can't feel loyalty or honor. I can't feel them. That doesn't mean I don't understand them. Logic dictates breaking my word would damage Valdos's reputation and my effectiveness as ruler. Therefore, I keep promises. The motivation is different, but result is same. It should have been reassuring, instead it just made her sad. I'll be ready at sunset, she said quietly, and left before he could see the tears forming. The great hall had been transformed. White roses, same flowers from her failed Kelmont wedding, filled every alcove, but here threaded with silver ribbons and winter berries. Ice sculptures stood in corners carved into wolves and crowns and intertwined hands. Hundreds of candles cast flickering light across tapestries depicting Frostborn history. The entire court assembled. Nobles in white and silver and pale blue, Valdos colors. They filled the hall in ordered ranks, whispering behind gloved hands. At the front, 3 thrones on a raised dais. Center throne, largest white stone, carved with intricate frost patterns. To its right, slightly smaller, matching throne. To its left, third throne, simpler but elegant. For the queen. For her. Serafina stood in an antechamber staring at her reflection. The wedding gown was stunning. The gown was white silk glowing in candlelight, embroidered with silver thread in snowflake and star patterns. High, modest neckline, long fitted sleeves. A train pooling behind like spilled moonlight. Her white hair arranged elaborately braided with winter flowers and silver chains. A circlet of white gold on her brow, not quite crown, but close. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. "You're beautiful, Your Majesty," Servant Mira said softly. "Thank you," Serafina managed. Her voice sounded hollow. Captain Astrid entered, armor polished to mirror shine. "They're ready for you, Your Majesty. King Thaddeus is waiting." Serafina took a deep breath. She walked into the great hall. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The assembled nobles watched in silence as she made her way down the long aisle. Thaddeus stood waiting, and her breath caught. He wore armor of white steel chased with silver, formal but functional. Pale hair pulled back, revealing sharp features. A crown on his head, white gold worked into winter wolf shape, eyes set with diamonds. He looked every inch a king. When his gray eyes met hers across distance, something in her chest tightened. Not the broken bond, something else. Something new and terrifying. She forced herself to keep walking. Beside Thaddeus stood Lysander, similarly dressed. And Father Aldrich, same priest from Kelmont, looked uncomfortable but resolute. Serafina reached the altar. Thaddeus extended his hand. She took it, feeling cold skin against hers. "You look well," he said quietly. Not a compliment, just observation. But from him, it was something. Father Aldrich raised his voice. "We gather under the moon to witness sacred union of King Thaddeus Frostborn of Valdos and Lady Serafina Moonwhite." Two souls joined in. The great doors crashed open. Guards shouted. Nobles gasped and scattered. King Aurelian Goldheart strode through entrance, resplendent in actual gold armor, surrounded by 24 soldiers in Salanthus colors. He walked down the aisle like he owned it, perfect smile on perfect face. Behind him came another figure that made Serafina's heart stop. Lady Morgana. Her stepmother wore deep crimson, dark hair elaborately arranged. She walked beside Aurelian like allies, like they'd planned this entrance together, which they probably had. Thaddeus's hand tightened fractionally on hers. Temperature in hall dropped. Frost began creeping across floor from where he stood. Aurelian stopped 20 feet from dais. Amber eyes swept the hall decorations, nobles, bride and groom. His smile widened. "My apologies for dramatic entrance, but I couldn't let this ceremony proceed without raising a concern." "King Aurelian," Thaddeus said, voice flat and cold as death. "You were invited as guest. Guests don't interrupt. But this is important. I have information directly impacting legitimacy of this union." Murmurs rippled through crowd. "What information?" Lysander demanded, hand moving to sword. Aurelian's eyes fixed on Serafina. "The bride was promised to me first." Murmurs turned to gasps. "That's a lie," Serafina said, voice shaking with anger. "I never—" "Didn't you?" Aurelian pulled a document from his belt. "This is a contract signed by Lady Morgana Ashwood, promising custody of her stepdaughter to Salanthus in exchange for substantial gold and political support." He handed the document to Father Aldrich, who read with growing alarm. "This appears genuine, signed and sealed by Lady Morgana, dated 3 months ago. I never agreed to any such thing." Serafina's power flared. The candles around the hall suddenly burned brighter. "Morgana had no right to sell me like property. She was your legal guardian. By Kelmont law, she had every right to arrange your future. This contract was signed before King Thaddeus ever arrived in Kelmont, which means legally you were already promised to me." The nobles erupted. Some shouted the contract was invalid. Others argued Kelmont law didn't apply. Still others demanded to see the document. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not another ceremony ruined enough. Thaddeus's voice cut through chaos like a blade. The hall went silent. He stepped forward, still holding Serafina's hand. "That contract is void." "On what grounds?" Aurelian's smile didn't waver, but something dangerous glinted in amber eyes. "On grounds that Lady Morgana had no authority to sell a woman of Luna bloodline. Luna-blooded wolves are sacred to Moon Goddess. They cannot be bought or sold like common property. Any contract attempting to do so is invalid under ancient laws that predate all 3 kingdoms." So Father Aldrich's eyes widened. He's correct. The old laws are clear. The old laws are exactly that old. No one's enforced them in 200 years because there were no Luna-blooded wolves left to protect. Until now, Brennick's voice rang out. The crowd parted as King Brennick Ironscars strode forward. Black armor marked with battle scars' presence commanding immediate respect. I stand as witness. I was present in Kelmont when Lady Seraphina made her choice freely, without coercion. She chose King Thaddeus. Any prior contract is irrelevant. And I, said another voice. A woman stepped forward, tall, regal, silver-streaked hair and eyes blazing with authority. Deep blue robes embroidered with stars. High Priestess Ravenna of the Moon Temple. I have traveled from sacred grounds to bear witness. The moon goddess herself showed me visions of white-haired queen standing beside frozen king. This marriage is blessed. Any who oppose it, oppose the goddess's will. Aurelian's smile finally cracked. This is absurd. We're all what King Aurelian, Thaddeus' interrupted voice still emotionless but somehow more dangerous. Defending a woman's right to choose her fate. Upholding laws protecting the sacred, or refusing to let you manipulate this situation to your advantage. The two kings stared at each other. Temperature continued dropping. Several nobles visibly shivered. Finally, Aurelian laughed. Bright, charming, not matching fury in his eyes. Very well, I can see I'm outnumbered. Politics and priestesses and ancient laws, quite the alliance you've built, Thaddeus. He turned to address the crowd. But let me ask you all something. Does Lady Seraphina even understand what she's chosen? Does she know what Frostborn curse truly means? Seraphina's heart began racing. She's marrying a man who cannot love her, a man whose heart is literally frozen, who will never feel joy at her presence, never grieve her absence, never cherish her the way a husband should cherish a wife. He looked directly at Seraphina. Is that really what you want, little wolf? A marriage as cold as winter. A husband who will lie beside you with empty eyes and emptier heart. You could have had gold, warmth, passion, everything a woman deserves. Instead, you're choosing ice. The words hit harder than they should, because he was right. Thaddeus would never love her, would never look at her the way Gareth once had, back when she'd believed bonds meant something. She would spend her life married to a beautiful statue, sleeping beside a man who couldn't feel her touch, raising children with a father who would never love them. It was bleak, lonely, but it was honest. You're right, Seraphina said clearly. King Thaddeus cannot love me. He's told me so himself. He's been completely honest about what this marriage is and isn't. She turned to look at Thaddeus. His gray eyes met hers, expressionless. He's never lied to me, never pretended to feel things he doesn't, never made promises he can't keep. And after spending my whole life surrounded by people who lied with every breath, who told me they cared, while plotting to sell me, who claimed we were fated, while planning to reject me, I'll take honest ice over false warmth any day. The hall was utterly silent. I choose King Thaddeus. I chose him in Kelmont, and I choose him again now. Not because he can give me passion or romance or fairy tales, but because he gave me truth when everyone else gave me lies. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something flickered across Thaddeus's face. Not quite emotion, but something close. Recognition, maybe, or respect. Then it was gone, and he was ice again. But Seraphina had seen it, that tiny crack in the frozen facade. Aurelian's expression hardened. The charming mask slipped. You'll regret this. When you're alone in his bed, wishing for warmth he can never give. When you're raising children who inherit his curse. When you realize you've trapped yourself in a prison of ice for the rest of your life, you'll remember this moment and know you made the wrong choice. If I do, it will still be my choice, mine, not yours, not Morgana's, not anyone else's. Aurelian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled again, perfect, dangerous. Very well, Lady Seraphina. Enjoy your wedding. But remember, winter doesn't last forever, and I am very, very patient. He turned and walked back down the aisle, guards falling into formation. Morgana followed, shooting Seraphina a look of pure hatred. The doors closed with a boom that echoed. Silence stretched. Then High Priestess Ravenna stepped forward. Shall we continue? Father Aldrich nodded shakily. We gather to witness sacred union of King Thaddeus Frostborn and Lady Seraphina Moonwhite. The ceremony proceeded, vows spoken traditional words about honor, loyalty, duty. Seraphina repeated them in a voice that sounded distant. Thaddeus spoke his vows with same flat precision. Rings exchanged, plain white gold bands elegant in simplicity. Then came the moment Seraphina had been dreading. You may now claim your bride, Father Aldrich announced. In wolf ceremonies, the claiming bite sealed the bond. Alpha would mark Omega's neck, taste their blood, forge connection that couldn't be broken. But if Thaddeus bit her, if he created a bond, the curse would activate. He would feel emotions for first time, and then he would die. The hall waited in breathless silence. Thaddeus stepped closer. His hand came up to cup her jaw, fingers cold against skin. Seraphina's heart hammered. He leaned down, his breath was cold against her throat. And then instead of biting her neck, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. It should have been chaste, formal, meaningless. But the moment his mouth touched her skin, electricity shot through Seraphina's entire body. Her power surged, not under control, not something she could stop. It reached for him instinctively, desperately, like drowning person reaching for air. For one terrible, beautiful moment, she felt him. The vast emptiness inside Thaddeus. The void where emotions should be. 12 generations of nothing, of ice, of frozen hearts. But beneath that nothing buried so deep she almost missed it, a spark. Tiny, fragile, fighting to exist despite curse. Something that felt almost like warmth. Thaddeus jerked back as if burned, his eyes wide, first genuine expression she'd seen. His hand went to his chest, pressing against hard. What? His voice cracked. What was that? Seraphina stared at him in horror, because she knew exactly what it was. The bond. She'd accidentally created a bond between them. And Thaddeus, for first time in 30 years, had felt something. Around the hall, no one seemed to notice anything wrong. Nobles applauded. High Priestess Ravenna blessed the union. Brennick nodded approval. But Seraphina saw what they couldn't. Frost spreading up Thaddeus's neck from beneath armor. Delicate patterns of ice, beautiful and deadly, climbing toward his jaw. The curse was activating. She had just killed the man who'd saved her. Father Aldrich raised his voice. I present to you King Thaddeus and Queen Seraphina of Valdos. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Seraphina watched ice creep across her husband's skin, knowing she had just sentenced him to death. The wedding feast was the longest night of Seraphina's life. She sat beside Thaddeus while nobles approached with congratulations. She smiled and nodded and said appropriate things. She ate food she couldn't taste, drank wine that turned to ash, and all the while she watched frost spread, subtle, barely visible beneath his collar. But she could see it advancing centimeter by centimeter, climbing from chest toward throat. Thaddeus gave no indication anything was wrong. Sat perfectly still, perfectly controlled, acknowledging well-wishers with fractional nods. But twice she saw his hand move to his chest, pressing, testing, feeling something he'd never felt before. Hours passed, musicians played, nobles danced, wine flowed. Finally, feast began winding down. Elder Celestine appeared at Seraphina's elbow. You should retire, Your Majesty. It's traditional for bride and groom to leave before celebration ends. Seraphina nodded mutely. Thaddeus rose and offered his arm. They walked through hall together, nobles parting, knowing smiles on faces. They thought this was normal wedding night. They had no idea what was coming. Thaddeus led her to royal chambers, massive suite prepared for them. Fire roared in hearth. Bed enormous, draped with white furs and silk. Candles cast soft light across walls hung with tapestries. It should have been romantic. It felt like a tomb. The moment the door closed, Thaddeus pulled at his collar, tearing fabric from throat. The frost had spread to his jaw. Delicate ice crystals covered skin like second layer, beautiful and horrifying. What did you do? His voice was different. Not flat. There was something in it, confusion maybe. Fear. Actual emotion bleeding through. What did you do to me? I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. When you kissed my hand, my power it reached for you. I couldn't stop it. You created a bond. Thaddeus touched ice on throat with trembling fingers. I can feel it, like a thread connecting us. I can sense your emotions, your fear, your guilt. His eyes met hers, no longer empty, full of terror and wonder and confusion. I've never felt anything before, not in 30 years. And now I feel everything. We have to break it. Celestine said I could sever bonds. Maybe if I... No, Thaddeus's voice was sharp. Don't touch it. You might make it worse. It can't get worse, you're dying. I know. He laughed, actual laugh, rough and broken. I can feel that too. The curse activating. My heart slowing. Ice spreading. He looked at her with newly awakened eyes. How long do I have? Celestine said days, maybe a week. Days. He sat heavily on bed edge. 30 years of nothing. And now I get days of feeling before it kills me. Seraphina moved toward him, then stopped, afraid to get closer. Afraid her power would surge and make things worse. I'm so sorry, I never wanted this. You saved me and You did what your power does. Luna-blooded wolves create bonds. It's your nature, I knew the risk. Then why did you kiss me? Why touch me at all? Because court expected it. Because not claiming you publicly would raise questions. He looked at hands watching frost creep across fingers. And because he paused, struggling with words, with feelings he had no practice expressing. Because part of me wanted to know what it would feel like, just once, for I died empty. Tears streamed down Serafina's face. You're going to die anyway. Now you'll just feel it happening. Yes. Thaddeus looked at her expression so raw, so vulnerable, it hurt to see. But I'll also feel this, whatever this is, this warmth, this connection. For 30 years I thought I was dead inside. Turns out I was just frozen. And now I'm melting. He stood and crossed a window looking over his kingdom. Frost on skin caught moonlight, making him look like statue carved from ice and starlight. Go to Celestine tomorrow. Learn everything about breaking bonds. Find a way to sever this connection before curse completes. What if I can't? Then I die. His voice was matter of fact, but she could feel fear underneath. The bond let her sense his emotions like her own. But at least I'll die having lived. Really lived. Even if only for a few days. That's not enough. It's more than any Frostborn has had in 12 generations. He turned to face her. My father died never knowing what joy felt like. Never experiencing love or fear or hope. I always thought that was normal. He took a step toward her, then another, until close enough she could see individual frost crystals on his eyelashes. But it's not normal, he whispered. You're warm, so warm, and I can feel it through bond. Your heat, your life, your presence, it's overwhelming. His hand came up slowly. When she didn't pull away, he cupped her face with fingers that were ice against skin. I can feel this. I can feel you trembling. I can feel your pulse racing. I can feel everything. His thumb brushed away a tear. Is this what it's always been like for others, this much sensation? Yes, Serafina breathed. No wonder people do such foolish things for love. If it all feels like this intense, this real, I finally understand why my ancestor was so desperate to escape it. Don't make me fall for you when I'm killing you. You're not making me do anything. I'm choosing to feel this, to experience it, for however long I have left. He leaned down slowly. She didn't stop him. His lips touched hers, cold as winter, gentle as falling snow. The bond between them blazed like silver fire, connecting them in ways deeper than touch, deeper than blood. For one perfect, terrible moment, Serafina felt what he felt. 30 years of nothing ending, warmth flooding through him for first time, fear and wonder and desperate aching, need to feel more before too late. And underneath it all, fighting against curse, against ice in his veins, something that felt almost like love. When they broke apart, more ice had spread across his skin. It covered half his face now, beautiful and deadly. We need to stop. Every time we touch, it gets worse. I know, but he didn't let her go. Just let me feel this for one more moment. Let me remember what it's like to be alive. They stood together while fire crackled and moon watched through window. And outside in darkness beyond Valdos's walls, Aurelian smiled to himself. Everything was proceeding exactly as he'd planned. 3 weeks of slow dying. Serafina spent every waking hour with Celestine desperately searching for a way to sever the bond without killing Thaddeus in the process. The old woman taught her meditation techniques, shielding exercises, ways to channel power safely. But nothing worked. Luna bonds are meant to be permanent, Celestine said on the 15th day, frustration bleeding through her usual composure. Breaking one could kill both parties. The backlash would be better than watching him die slowly, Serafina interrupted. The frost had spread further. It covered Thaddeus's entire face, now climbing down his neck toward his chest, toward his heart. He could still speak, still move, but his breathing had grown labored. His heart beat slower each day. And worst of all, he could feel it, feel himself dying inch by frozen inch. At night, he came to her chambers, not for intimacy, but for warmth. He would lie beside her, fully clothed, just absorbing the heat radiating from her body through the bond. Tell me about your childhood, he'd say. Tell me about anything. I want to fill these last days with something other than ice. So she would talk. About her father, the few memories she had. About growing up under Morgana's roof. About the small rebellions, sneaking books, exploring the forest, dreaming of escape. And he would listen, those gray eyes no longer empty, fixed on her face with an intensity that made her heart ache. On the 18th day, everything changed. Serafina was in the training yard practicing with a sword under Captain Astrid's instruction. Her Luna power could manifest as silver fire, but Astrid insisted she needed practical combat skills too. Power's useless if you can't control your body, Astrid said, correcting Serafina's stance. Plant your feet, feel the ground. Now strike. Bells began ringing across the castle. Not the gentle chimes that marked hours. These were alarm bells, harsh and urgent. Astrid's head snapped up. That's the siege warning. They ran to the battlements. What Serafina saw made her blood freeze. An army surrounded Valdos. Thousands of soldiers in gold armor, Solanthus banners snapping in the wind, siege engines positioned at intervals around the walls, and at the front, mounted on a white horse, King Aurelian Goldheart. Beside him, wearing black and crimson, sat Lady Morgana. This is impossible, Captain Astrid breathed. How did they get an entire army into position without our scouts reporting? Traitors, Lysander's voice said from behind them. He joined them on the battlements, his face already marked with frost, like his brother's, grim with understanding. Someone inside Valdos has been helping them. As if in answer, part of the eastern wall exploded, not from outside bombardment, from inside. Someone had planted explosives within the walls themselves. Lord Corvin, Lysander said, naming one of the senior council members. He's been advocating for alliance with Solanthus for months. I thought it was politics. I didn't realize. Another explosion rocked the castle. This one in the North Tower, Aurelian's voice magically amplified, boomed across the battlefield. People of Valdos, your king is dying. The curse is claiming him as it has claimed every Frostborn before him. But it doesn't have to claim you or render Lady Serafina to me, and I will spare your city. Refuse, and I will take her from your corpses. The castle erupted into chaos. Soldiers running to positions. Civilians fleeing to the inner keep. Servants screaming. Serafina found Thaddeus in the war room, bent over maps, frost covering so much of his body now that he looked carved from ice. You need to leave, he said without looking up. His voice was hoarse, damaged by the frost creeping into his throat. Take Lysander and a guard unit. Go through the escape tunnels. Brennick will give you sanctuary in Catherine. I'm not leaving. Serafina, I'm not leaving. Her power flared and every candle in the room suddenly burned with silver fire. Aurelian came here for me. This battle is because of me. I won't run while people die protecting me. Thaddeus finally looked at her. And despite the ice consuming his face, despite the curse killing him, his eyes held something fierce. Then we fight, he said simply. Together. The siege lasted 3 days. Aurelian's forces battered the walls with siege engines. His soldiers found the breaches Lord Corvin had created and poured through. Valdos' guards, vastly outnumbered, fought with the desperation of people defending their home. And Serafina discovered what her Luna power could truly do. On the second day, when Solanthus soldiers breached the inner courtyard, Serafina stood on the battlements above them. She could feel the bonds between them, threads of loyalty connecting each soldier to Aurelian, to their pack alphas, to each other. She reached out with her power and severed them, all at once. The soldiers below suddenly stumbled, confusion washing over their faces. The bonds that had connected them, that had given them purpose and direction, were simply gone. They were alone inside their heads for the first time in their lives. Half of them fled. The others fought each other in confusion. Goddess above, Celestine breathed, watching from beside her. I've never seen Luna power used on that scale. But it cost her. Serafina collapsed, blood streaming from her nose. Using power like that on so many bonds simultaneously was like setting her brain on fire. Thaddeus carried her to safety, his frozen hands somehow gentle. Don't do that again, he said, voice rough with emotion he was still learning to express. You could kill yourself. You're dying anyway, Serafina pointed out. What does it matter if I... He kissed her, hard, desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When he pulled back, more ice had spread, but his eyes burned. It matters, he said simply. You matter. On the third day, Aurelian himself entered the castle. Lord Corvin opened the last sealed gate from the inside, letting the Golden King and his personal guard pour into the throne room. Thaddeus was there waiting, Lysander beside him. Both brothers so consumed by frost now that they could barely move, but they stood firm, swords in frozen hands. Stand aside, Aurelian said almost gently. You're dying, Thaddeus. Both of you. The curse is completing. Why die for a woman who's killing you? Because she's worth dying for, Thaddeus replied. His voice was barely a whisper now, the frost having claimed most of his throat. Something you'll never understand. Aurelian's perfect face twisted with rage. Then die, he attacked. The fight was brutal and short. Thaddeus and Lysander, weakened by the curse, couldn't match Aurelian's speed. Within minutes, both brothers were on their knees, disarmed frost spreading so rapidly now that Seraphina could see it advancing in real time. Aurelian's sword point rested against Thaddeus's throat. Last chance. Give me the Luna-blooded woman, or I end you. No! The word came from the doorway. Seraphina stood there dressed in armor she'd taken from the guard. In her right hand, a sword burned with silver fire Luna magic made manifest, and beside her stood King Brennick Ironscars leading a force of Catherone warriors. Your seers were right about me, Seraphina said to Brennick. I do stand in silver fire. And they also said you'd break chains that have bound kings for 12 generations. Brennick replied, let's see if they were right about that too. What followed was chaos. Brennick's forces crashed into Aurelian's guards. Steel rang against steel. Men shouted and died. But Seraphina only had eyes for Thaddeus. He was on his knees, ice covering everything but his eyes. His heart had slowed to perhaps one beat every 10 seconds. The curse was in its final stages. Seraphina knelt before him, laying down the burning sword. I can't sever the bond, she said. Celestine was right, it would kill us both. But I found something else in the ancient texts. Something about the original curse. Thaddeus couldn't speak anymore. The ice had sealed his mouth, but his eyes begged her to continue. The curse kills frostborns who feel love because it's designed to freeze hearts. But what if... Seraphina placed both hands over his heart. What if the love burns hotter than the ice can freeze? She opened the bond between them completely. Not holding back, not trying to protect herself. She poured everything into it, every ounce of love, of hope, of desperate longing. And she felt him respond. Despite the curse, despite the ice, despite 12 generations of frozen hearts, Thaddeus loved her. She could feel it blazing through the bond like the sun. The ice began to crack. It started at his heart where her hands pressed. Fissures spreading outward, racing across his chest, up his neck, across his face. The curse tried to fight back, tried to seal the cracks to freeze him solid. But Seraphina's love and his love in return burned too hot. The ice shattered. It exploded outward in a wave of frost and light that knocked everyone in the room off their feet. When the glare faded, Thaddeus knelt before her, gasping for breath, the frost completely gone. His skin was warm, his heartbeat strong and steady. And his eyes, those gray eyes that had been empty for 30 years, burned with life. I love you, he said, voice hoarse but clear. I love you, and I'm not dying. The curse is broken. Lysander's voice equally hoarse. He was on his feet, frost melting from his skin too. Whatever you did, sister, you broke it. For both of us. Seraphina laughed and cried simultaneously. Celestine was right. Love's stronger than the curse. Love that burns hot enough. Thaddeus pulled her into his arms and kissed her. And this time his lips were warm. Behind them, Brennick had Aurelian in chains. It's over, the warrior king said. Surrender, Goldheart. You've lost. Aurelian's perfect face was bruised, his golden armor dented. But his amber eyes still held fury. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you've won. You've merely delayed enough, Seraphina said, standing. The silver sword flew to her hand, drawn by her power. I could execute you for this, for attacking Valdos, for allying with traitors, for trying to enslave me. She walked toward him slowly, the burning blade illuminating her path. But I'm not going to kill you. Aurelian blinked in surprise. I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to let you live knowing you failed, that you schemed and planned and betrayed and still lost, that the woman you tried to control chose ice over your gold, that the curse you thought would give you victory actually made your enemy stronger. She leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper. You will live with that failure for the rest of your life, and that will hurt you more than any execution. She straightened and addressed the room. King Aurelian Goldheart is hereby banished from all three kingdoms. If he returns, the sentence is death. Brennick nodded approval. Catherine recognizes this judgment. As does Valdos, Thaddeus said, his voice growing stronger with each word. Guards dragged Aurelian away, his threats and curses fading into echoes, which left one more piece of business. Lady Morgana had tried to flee during the battle, but been captured by Valdos' guards. They brought her before Seraphina, now forcing her to her knees. Please. Morgana begged, all her cold superiority gone. Seraphina, I raised you. I cared for you. You poisoned me. Seraphina interrupted. For 23 years, you fed me suppressants to keep my power caged. You plotted to sell me to Aurelian. And worst of all, you murdered my real mother to steal me as a child. Morgana's face went white. Yes, Seraphina said softly. I know. Alara Silvermoon, my true mother, the woman my father loved. You couldn't stand that he loved her more than you, so you killed her and claimed me as your own. Not out of love, but to control the Luna power you knew I'd inherit. That's not, I didn't, don't lie to me. Silver fire danced around Seraphina's hands. I can feel lies now. It's part of my power, and you're drowning in them. She looked at Thaddeus. He nodded once. Lady Morgana Ashwood, you are guilty of murder, conspiracy, treason, and attempted enslavement of a sacred bloodline. The sentence is life imprisonment. No, please, I'm a noble. I have rights. Guards dragged her away, her screams fading. Seraphina's legs suddenly gave out. Thaddeus caught her, his warm arms wrapping around her. It's over, he murmured into her hair. You did it. You saved me. Saved Valdos. Broke a 12-generation curse. We did it, Seraphina corrected. Together. 6 months after the siege, Valdos celebrated spring. For the first time in 12 generations, the eternal winter had ended. Snow melted. Green grass pushed through frozen ground. Flowers bloomed in the courtyards. The curse's breaking had done more than save 2 lives. It had transformed the entire kingdom. Seraphina stood on a balcony overlooking the city, one hand resting on her swollen belly, where twin heartbeats fluttered. 6 months pregnant with heirs who would never know the curse. Warm arms wrapped around her from behind. Thaddeus rested his chin on her shoulder, his hand covering hers over their children. Our sons, he murmured. Lysander thinks they'll both be alphas, says he can already sense their wolves. And what do you think? I think they're ours. Alpha, beta, omega doesn't matter. They'll be loved. They'll feel everything we were denied. And that's enough. Seraphina turned in his arms, studying his face. 6 months of feeling emotions, and he still sometimes looks surprised when they hit him. Joy made him smile in wonder. Sorrow made him cry without shame. And love made him look at her like she'd hung the moon. I never thought I'd have this, she said softly. After Kelmont, after everything, I thought I'd spend my life alone in a political arrangement with a man who couldn't feel. Instead, you got a man who feels everything, Thaddeus replied. Sometimes too much. Elder Celestine says I need to learn emotional regulation. Elder Celestine can mind her own business, he laughed. That was still new too, the sound of his laughter, warm and genuine and free. Below them, the courtyard was being prepared for another ceremony. Not a wedding this time, but a bonding celebration. Lysander had found his mate. Against all odds, it was Isolde. Seraphina's half-sister had arrived 3 months ago, alone and ashamed. Gareth had abandoned her when the truth about Morgana came out. The pack had turned on her. She'd come to Valdos with nothing but apologies and hope for forgiveness. Seraphina had surprised herself by granting it. She was as much a victim of Morgana's schemes as I was, Seraphina had told Thaddeus. Raised to be selfish, taught to compete instead of support. She didn't have to come here, didn't have to face me. But she did. And then Lysander had met her. The bond between them had been instant, undeniable. For Lysander, who'd spent 30 years feeling nothing, it had been overwhelming. For Isolde, it had been redemption. They're good for each other, Thaddeus said, reading Seraphina's thoughts through their bond. Even 6 months later, that casual intimacy still made her shiver. She's teaching him softness. He's teaching her strength. Movement at the courtyard entrance drew their attention. King Brennick Ironscars arrived with his own delegation among them, a woman Seraphina didn't recognize. Beautiful, dark-haired, wearing Catharon colors. Is that his mate? Thaddeus confirmed. He found her 2 months ago, sent us a message saying his seers had been right about everything, including his own future. The 3 kingdoms were at peace. Aurelian had been banished, his kingdom now ruled by a council until a new king could be chosen. Morgana rotted in the dungeons. Lord Corvin and his fellow traitors had been executed. And Valdos thrived. The eternal winter's end had brought prosperity. Crops growing for the first time in generations. Trade routes opening. People smiling. All because one broken Omega had refused to stay broken. Your Majesties, Captain Astrid called from the doorway. The ceremony is about to begin. Seraphina and Thaddeus made their way to the Great Hall. It had been completely rebuilt after the siege, more beautiful than before. White stone and silver accents, but now warm tapestries hung on the walls. Flowers from the spring gardens filled every alcove, and sunlight, actual warm sunlight, poured through new windows. Lysander stood at the altar, looking nervous in a way that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Isolde approached in a gown of pale gold, tears streaming down her face. The ceremony was brief but beautiful. When Lysander marked Isolde completing their bond, the joy that flooded through him was so powerful that Seraphina felt it echo through her own bond with Thaddeus. That's what it feels like, Thaddeus whispered in her ear. when you're not dying, when you're not cursed, when you can just feel. After the ceremony came the feast. Music and dancing and celebration. Seraphina found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Elder Celestine proud and as if Seraphina were her own granddaughter. Lady Helena, who'd become a genuine friend. Captain Astrid and the Valdos guards who'd fought beside her during the siege. And in the corner, watching everything with sharp attention, High Priestess Ravenna of the Moon Temple. The priestess approached as the feast wound down. "Walk with me, child," she said. They moved to a quiet corridor away from the celebration. "You broke a curse that had stood for 12 generations," Ravenna said without preamble. "You discovered that Luna power could be used in combat. You unified 3 kingdoms through your choices. The moon goddess is pleased." "I just did what I had to do. To survive. To protect the people I love." "Exactly," Ravenna smiled. "That's what makes you worthy. You didn't seek power, it found you. And when it did, you used it for protection, not conquest." She produced a small pendant from her robes, a silver moon on a delicate chain. "This was worn by the first Luna 3,000 years ago. I'm giving it to you now, not because of your bloodline, but because of your choices." Seraphina took the pendant with trembling hands. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll remember that power is responsibility, that the ability to forge and sever bonds is sacred, that you'll use it wisely." "I will, I promise." Ravenna nodded and walked away, leaving Seraphina alone with the pendant. She returned to the feast to find Thaddeus watching her with those gray eyes that now showed everything he felt. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. "I'm 6 months pregnant. I can barely see my feet." "Then I'll guide you." They danced slowly, carefully in the center of the great hall while the court watched and smiled. "I was thinking," Thaddeus said as they swayed to the music, "when the twins are born, we should build a school for young wolves who manifest unusual powers. Teach them control, give them protection, so no one else has to grow up like I did, suppressed and afraid." "Exactly." Seraphina rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong and steady and warm. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He tightened his arms around her. "For the first time in my life, I can say that and mean it. Feel it. Live it." The music swelled. The candles flickered. The moon rose full and bright through the windows. And in the great hall of Valdos, a woman who'd been rejected as cursed danced with a king who'd learned to love, surrounded by people who'd fought for them in a kingdom that had learned to feel. 3 months ago, Seraphina had stood at an altar while her fated mate rejected her, while her sister betrayed her, while her stepmother sold her. Now she stood in the arms of a man who'd risked death for her, in a castle full of people who respected her, in a kingdom that called her queen. She'd been called cursed, defective, worthless, and she'd proven them all wrong. Outside, spring continued to transform Valdos. Inside, Seraphina felt her children move beneath her heart, and beside her, Thaddeus whispered words of love in a voice that finally knew what love meant. The worst night of her life had become the beginning of everything. And as Seraphina looked around the great hall at Lysander and Isolde dancing at Brennick, laughing with his mate, at Elder Celestine smiling with pride, at the Valdos guards who'd fought beside her, she realized something profound. She'd been broken, and in the breaking, she'd become whole. The moon watched through the windows, silver and eternal, and for once Seraphina felt like it was smiling.